start by asking you where you think Zhao is from. What city would you guess he lived? Just yell it out, please.
Los Angeles.
That's because I said Zhao. I made a mistake. He is from Rio, and the point is that he could be from anywhere, because you mentioned a lot of cities. So that there is an emerging global middle-class culture represented by him. And he's probably listening to hip-hop, right? He's got a skateboard. This is a woman that I interviewed in southern Egypt. And she illustrates beautifully that this global youth culture is a hybrid culture. So you can see she's got, well, you probably wouldn't know, but she has 4 layers of hijab on. And then her t-shirt says, "A sexy dressed viral girl." That's perfect. She's a graduate student. And as in most developing countries, she's living at home, because you don't live by yourself or with people your age. So for the last decade, I've been doing research on global youth. And the reason that I wanted to do it is because I realized they will shape our future, right? You will shape, you're going to be our future leaders and current trendsetters. And in the process, I've traveled to maybe 20 countries and interviewed and surveyed over 4,000 young people from 88 countries. And one of the interesting things that I've learned is about ageism. So people are pretty aware nowadays of sexism and racism, right? They're kind of aware of those kind of issues. But now when people think ageism, they maybe think of discrimination against older workers. But what I found in doing this research is there's a lot of ageism in research. And there's 2 schools. One school is youth are narcissistic, selfish, obsessed with media, like our first speaker, and just care about their own gratification. Generation me. And then the other school is Generation we. And they say, oh, youth today volunteer. They are globally connected. They know what's going on in the world. They care that there's children, there's 1 billion people who are hungry. They care about that because they can see the pictures on the internet and that kind of thing. So I wanted to include the youth voice because hardly anybody does. Even in books that are sympathetic about youth, they don't include youth talking. It's all the grown-ups talking about the youth who aren't allowed to speak for themselves. So I have 3 books in process, and I invite you to critique, to read any of the chapters if you'd like to be involved in this honest portrayal of what youth are doing. And one book is about global youth activism, one is about young women's issues and activism, and the other is about global beliefs and values. So anytime you want them, just email me and I will send them. I love this picture that I took in Shanghai. Can you see what it says on his jacket? Future. It's perfect. Oh, I gotta get this picture. But the reason I included this is the average person in the world today is a young Chinese man. And it's going to change because by 2025 it's going to be a young Indian man. Why am I saying man and not young people? Because there's more young men than women. Why is that? Sex selection, right? So in China, India, countries where people can afford it, they get ultrasounds. Oh, I'm carrying a female fetus, I'm going to abort it. Or I gave birth to a female baby, so I'm going to let her umbilical cord get infected and let her die. So female infanticide is still a problem around the world. So what kind of impact is this generation going to make? They're the largest generation ever. They're the best educated. They're the most connected, and that connection gives power. So what are the characteristics of this generation? They're more egalitarian. For example, when someone asked Stokely Carmichael about the position of women in SNCC in the 60s, a radical group, he said the position of women is prone. And no one would say that today, right? They might think of it, they wouldn't say it. And in the 60s, the radicals had alpha males who ran the show. And today, there's much more acceptance of men and women as friends, as co-workers, respect. And around the world, more women are graduating from university than men, especially that's true of the US too. So some people are starting to worry about a male crisis in education and that kind of thing. So as women move into leadership positions, that's going to be really interesting to see what kind of changes are made. And already young people have changed the priority of global leaders. So even Republican candidates are talking about a growing income gap and that it has to be changed. So, and that's because of the Occupy movement. How many of you heard of Occupy Wall Street? So that's maybe half of the room. Okay. Another characteristic of the generation today is that there's a growing inequality. So 1% of the world's wealthy people control what percent of the world's wealth, would you say?
90.
It's almost half, and it's projected to be more than half next year. So, I mean, that's terrible. So there's 80 wealthy people who control as much wealth as 3.5 billion low-income people. So, and that gap is growing, and it's due to neoliberal capitalism, which we can talk about during the question period if you want. So I took this picture in a village in Tanzania, and all that was there was they had little blue books to write in, no textbooks, no glass in the windows, just open windows, and you can see how close they're sitting. And that's normal. That wasn't some kind of special thing. That's how they sit. And most of those kids won't be able to afford to go on to high school, because in developing countries, you've got to pay for uniform, textbooks, school fees, and a lot of times you have to pass tests. And if you go to a crummy primary school with an uneducated teacher or high teacher absenteeism, which is a huge problem, then you're not going to pass the test, you're not going to go to secondary school. And so that raises rising expectations, because in a lot of villages now, you still have battery-powered TVs and battery-powered radios, even in the boonies. So there's this, oh, look how that family's living on TV. I have nothing? Something's wrong here. So there's more information and rising expectations. This is a woman named Michelle who's 18, and I had one of the interviewees for my book interview her because she's illiterate and lives in a village. And I thought, there's such a disparity between people like you who are educated and rural young people in developing countries. And we've got to understand what their life is like. So the interview is available on the Global Youth website. You can read it and see what life is like. But she has no power. She just works. She works around the house. She works cleaning house. She has no choice over anything. Her family picked her fiance, who she met once. She doesn't know how old he is or know very much about him. And she doesn't even know if he'll marry her because her dad works as a laborer earning just like pennies a day, and his family wants gold jewelry, which is customary in Indian and Pakistani weddings. So I read the interview and I said, Hassan, ask her if she wants to go to school to learn. And she said yes. So I had Hassan start a literacy program. So if anybody wants to get involved in that, it's going on now. And I have high school students in Peshawar teaching illiterate village kids where there's no schools. So her mother wouldn't let her come to our school, which is taught in someone's home, because she thought the fiance wouldn't like it. she'd be out and about too much. So what do young people want? How are they going to make change? They want an end to the rule of the 1%. Again, it's not fair that 1% controls by next year over half the world's wealth, and it's getting more problematic, not less. 87% of young people live in developing countries, so this is really going to shape our future. And a majority of them don't have high levels of well-being. So there's going to be some problems. So how many of you have heard of the Arab Spring that happened in 2011? So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Maybe half of you, would you say? Everybody should have heard about this because it's a fantastic beginning of youth-led uprisings around the world. And young people like these overthrew the corrupt president of Egypt, Hosni Mubarak, in 18 days. So they're very successful using Facebook and media and whatever. So I was here talking to them in the summer of 2011. I thought I was going to stay with a teacher, but her husband decided no. So I was in Egypt traveling by myself, which was very interesting. He's a socialist business major, and these guys are petroleum engineers, as you would expect. And they succeeded. So the uprising spread from Tunisia, that started the end of 2010, to Egypt, Yemen, which you know is in total chaos now. It's really been destroyed. Spain, Greece, Israel, Chile, US, Russia, Quebec, more recently to Turkey, Brazil, Hong Kong, and then the most recent university students are striking in South Africa because they think the university system is colonial, white, needs change. So what's interesting is that all these uprisings around the world were very similar. So they took place in squares, or as in New York, in Zuccotti Park, Gezi Park in Istanbul, where I'm going to go in June. And they focused on direct democracy. So all of these places had libraries, childcare, healthcare centers, counseling, even little gardens they started. So it was a do-it-yourself kind of movement with horizontal direct democracy, meaning if we were in a gathering, we would work by consensus. We would have rules that the people who are less likely to be heard will speak first. They did hand signs. Have you seen those? Like, this means yes, twinkle means yes, no, I don't like this at all. And they had similar slogans, enough, and they really are not interested in changing government because they think government is corrupt. So they want to work in the cracks of capitalism and create new independent kind of societies. Have you heard of the Zapatistas in southern Mexico? Anybody? They're widely referred to as kind of a revolutionary, egalitarian example. The Kurds are creating a similar democratic, non-sexist, feminist situation in northern Syria, of all places. That's really interesting. So I'm collecting examples of these model communities for my next book. Another characteristic of this generation is that they're really young. I'm sure everybody's heard of Malala Yousafzai, right? So she started working for girls' education when she was 11. She spoke to the UN when she was 16. She spoke to Obama and said, don't you spend any more money on drones that just kill people and make them hate the US. Spend money on books. So she is very direct. Chile has one of the most organized student groups along with Quebec students, and they have fought against privatization of education in Chile. And they're making some progress. Chile is interesting because some of the student leaders who are communists decided to run for parliament, and 4 of them were elected. So that's a new kind of trend of youth saying, okay, we're going to try to change the government from within, not just go to the countryside and have a farm. Hong Kong, how many of you heard about the protests there? Just a few. The students led an umbrella revolution. It's called umbrella because they used it to protect against police tear gas. That's another characteristic of all these uprisings is police use tear gas, water cannons with chemicals, and rubber bullets or real bullets. So maybe 800 people at least were killed in the Egyptian uprising. So the ironic thing for the governments is when the police come to the streets and harass people, it brings a lot of supporters out. So that the police have been kind of the best ally in some ways of the uprisings. People say, oh, I don't want to see my kids treated like that. That's Occupy Wall Street. Ideas are bulletproof. So the youth were very successful in overthrowing the strong man, but the failing is not having a disciplined, planned out strategy for how to replace it. So there's a vacuum, and so you know Putin, and this is General El-Sisi in Egypt. He was a military general. When he was a general, he allowed women demonstrators to have virginity checks to see if they were virgins. I mean, these are really sexist society. So he's a strong man in Egypt. And so the problem is, what do you do after the uprising? And that's still to be decided. Why is this generation so brave that they can go to the front lines and stand in front of the police water cannons? They get a lot of support globally for each other on the internet. Mobile phone allows organizing from anywhere. You don't have to meet in a place where the police can break you up. And I've really been interested in how effective Western media is, like Disney. A woman in Egypt said, I love The Lion King, Finding Nemo, and Ants. I was always wondering why we weren't rebelling against authority in Egypt. So I think Disney has been a big influence in global youth attitudes. Another is the UN has fought hard for human rights and children's rights and feminism. I love this. It's a Pakistani cartoon, and this superhero is a teacher, and her weapons are books and pens. So watch out, because the Burqa Avenger will get you. And this is an Indian cartoon. Both of these are made by men, so it's typical of this generation that men and women are allies. And the story with her is that she was raped and then became an outcast in her village. She went to the jungle to escape. A goddess gave her superhuman powers, and she tamed the tiger and goes around to the villages to help girls. So the question is, as this large, educated, connected generation assumes more power, as there's more uprisings to protest climate damage and the rule of the 1%, what are we going to see? More unrest, more uprisings. They've continued pretty steadily since 2010. More social consciousness in business and government. So a lot of young people are interested in entrepreneurship, like this event, but they want it to be socially effective. So they don't want to make money on sweatshop labor. They don't want to make money selling tobacco. Maybe pot, but not tobacco. And we'll see more equality between genders, ages, colors. Young people don't care about that, in a way. And globalization is just speeding up. Mark Zuckerberg is working on a plan so that everybody in the world is connected to the internet. Of course, that'll give Facebook a lot more money, but so what can we do? Since the main problems are economic inequality and climate damage, we can practice environmentalism, which means ride our bikes, don't eat meat, because meat is a worse polluter than transportation around the world. Call professors or authors or researchers when they write about youth and don't include one youth voice. So that's ageism. Forget it. And we need to elect honest politicians who will do things like oppose Citizens United and not be sold out by the Koch brothers, you know? And I have a lot of solutions on my Green Model Communities and Global Youth Speak Out pages on Facebook and WordPress. So to finish up, there's a lot of information on my Global Youth Book WordPress blog. Photos are on the Facebook page, Global Youth Speak Out. I have a lot of video interviews with young people around the world. If you want to see any of those are on YouTube. The web page for the Pakistani Literacy Project is on Open Doors Literacy Project, Weebly.com. And I would really hope that you would take down my email, gkimball@csuchico.edu, and let me know if you want to read any chapters and critique them. And I also have all the surveys, and it's all in social science statistical package if anyone needs a project. So I want to share because I've spent 10 years working on this. So I want to have it be something that is useful to you. So I hope you'll stick around and ask questions because I think I'm over time.
There we go. Round of applause for Gayle Kimball.